because recently George Orwell's novel 1984, which he wrote back in 1949. There's a lot of
48.
numbers here. 48, 49,
I think it was
somewhere in there.
published in 49, but it was like written in 48. That's why they called it 84. He just flipped the numbers.
Oh, okay. So, but all right. So that makes sense. But George Orwell is another one of those great science fiction writers who theorized a lot about the future. But his book 1984 is being made into another movie now. Actually, back in 1984, there was a movie 1984, but that's neither here
Really,
nor
they
there.
did that? I was actually wondering
Yeah.
about that. I was like, why wouldn't they have done that back then? But
John Hurt was actually the star of that movie back in the day. So,
it must not have been that
and
great
this
though,
novel,
because it hasn't lasted.
yeah,
The book last is a huge deal still, but
yeah, it
I don't
actually is
know.
still on the Amazon Hot 100 list or something like that right now. Might be because of the news of the new movie, but also just because of the themes of this. We'll get into what the book really entails, but we're talking about it right now because they have just gotten a director. They have confirmed that Paul Greengrass, you might know him from our story about the Bourne series, he's actually going to be the director of this new movie. Now, it's probably not going to come out until like 2016, 2017, somewhere in there,
Hmm.
and there's no casting news as to date. But I thought that this was just a really, really cool idea for a movie, especially nowadays. You could really put a lot of the ideas and see a lot of the ideas he had that you couldn't even see those in 1984 really go into play. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So just to give you a little bit of backstory on the book, again, published in 1949, it's about a dystopian future. It actually takes place in England. I believe it's called like Neo England or New England or something like
It's called
that. Where
Oceania.
Oceania,
Actually.
good job, you got me. There you go. All right, good thing one of us read the book. Not it wasn't me, but it was him. Oceania, and it's a dystopian future. Pretty much, you have three giant countries that are really, or three giant groups, like government groups that are perpetually fighting each other. And this one takes place in the England group right there. And it's the whole area is ruled by a group called the Inner Circle. And then they have three groups. You have the inner circle, you have the outer circle, and I can't remember what they call the third group. Do you
The
remember?
uh, Praetorians, I think, or the
Yeah, Praetorians. Yeah, there you go. The Praetorians, which is kind of weird because that's from like the Roman Praetorian Guard, but that's neither here nor there.
maybe the plebeians, something like that. It's one of those
Plebes.
like, yeah, lower
Yeah,
class, whatever.
the plebes. Yeah. Okay, so there, of course, the inner circle is like 1%. The outer circle is like another 10% on that, and then the other group is like 85%, or I don't know math, so that would be actually 89%. But it follows a character who is working. He's part of the outer circle. He works for the inner circle, and what he does is he rewrites newspaper articles to reflect the views of the inner circle. So he pretty much is a propaganda guy, and just goes back into the past and says, "Hey, everything that these guys say now is true." And a lot of terms, whether you've read this book or not, a lot of the terms that have come out of this book, everybody knows. Big Brother, that is
Mhm.
actually the name of the leader who might or might not be alive in this book. And that is where we get the term "Big Brother is watching you,"
Because that was the
that is
poster in
the
the
big.
book that they talk about. There's everywhere they go, they see posters saying "Big Brother is watching you."
And screens. There's all these television screens everywhere that
Hmm.
Big Brother's watching you. Big Brother's watching you. And pretty much they do. And he kind of theorized the internet, I want to say, back in 1948, which is kind of interesting because they have a way of getting into your head with these thought crimes. They have a thought police. If you think outside the lines of what they want you to think, they're really trying to suppress
Yeah,
individualism.
it wasn't the same. Like, we're actually kind of closer to what one might think of being able to actually read thoughts, because they couldn't read thoughts. It was just they would observe your actions really closely, and if they saw you do something that wouldn't necessarily be illegal but indicated that you were straying from the right point of view by your actions, like you're just doing something unusual or whatever, that was considered a thought crime. If you were doing things like using the wrong words, possibly, that could
Yeah.
be considered a thought crime.
And surveillance is everywhere in this dystopian future. They have cameras everywhere. I believe everybody's being monitored at some point, at all times of day, by again a central government agency. Big Brother is watching you. Again, that's where they get the terms. But it really, you look back at it, and especially after like the Snowden leaks and all this other stuff, you kind of see a lot of what he said, kind of warning us almost that technology and the overreach of government, and it's almost coming to true, which is unfortunate. But sci-fi, you should look at some of these sci-fi writers. Who is it? Somebody thought of the nuclear bomb in 1910. Which one was that? That was Orson Welles. Orson Welles did that one. Orson Welles also thought up the laser beam, which back in the 1800s, who could have theorized that? But it's just, I digress. It's just really, really cool. So other things that you might have known, about actually, that you might not have known were inspired by this. The Muse, actually, their album The Resistance is actually like a themed album off of the book. So a lot of people don't.
A lot of pop cultural references still to 1984. You hear people talk all the time about, oh, this thing is going to lead to a 1984 like society or Orwellian society, this or that, or people will even say sometimes like just shout out the term like 1984 and everyone knows they're talking about a surveillance state, thought crimes, ultra control.
You look at movies like Minority Report. Now I believe that was loosely kind of inspired by this novel, where they try to stop crimes before they happen. V for Vendetta, pretty much they made no bones about pretty much stealing the setting for this for their movie in V for Vendetta from 1984. You also have and that's pretty much it. And it's funny because John Hurt was also in V for Vendetta, and I think he did it because he liked doing 1984 so much, which makes me want to go back and watch that movie.
Here's another sci-fi reference for you. There was an episode of Star Trek that was essentially 1984 in the torture thing where Picard gets captured by Cardassians, and they subject him to essentially a 1984 like torture and psychological torture.
How many lights are there? There are 3 lights.
Yeah. There are 4 lights, whatever it is. So,
So it just shows that we're still being influenced by this book. So if you haven't ever read it, which I haven't, join me. I'm going to go out and find a copy of the book probably and read it, maybe, if I read.
I have a copy of the book.
Well, I'm going to borrow a copy of the book from my brother right there, Brendan, and I'm gonna read it because it really piqued my interest. But let us know what you think. Have you read it? Is it a great book? Should I read it? Are you excited about this movie? Let us know just any of your thoughts. Hit us up.
Could they possibly do it justice?
That's another good question. But hit us up.
All really a ploy to find out who's opposed to the government's will?
Maybe ticket sales they'll start monitoring you. Maybe. But hit us up. Comments down below, of course, at Words to My Face on Twitter, wordstomyface@gmail.com, Google Plus and Facebook. Always good ways of getting a hold of us.